Thank you, Chairman Collins, and congratulations for your selection to lead the Subcommittee on Water Resources and Environment. I look forward to working with you as the vice-ranking member in meeting the water-related needs of our nation, our communities, and the hardworking families that we represent. I'm privileged to serve Michigan's 3rd Congressional District in Congress, representing miles of beautiful Lake Michigan shoreline. It's a district whose history, lifestyle, and economic well-being are bound with the health of the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes are arguably the largest source of fresh water on the surface of the earth, containing roughly 20% of the world's freshwater supply. For our region, the protections of the Great Lakes and the health of our environment is not a partisan issue. It's something that is ingrained in our culture as we responsibly teach the next generation to be good stewards of our environment. Our quality of life and our very existence depend on clean water for everyday consumption, for commerce, recreation, and the overall economic vitality of the region. It supports our farmers who grow their crops from apples to pears, peach trees, and soybeans. It supports the foundation of the great craft beer that forms Beer City, USA, that I'm so proud to represent. That is why I am so deeply concerned with the harm that this administration and the allies in Congress are imposing on our clean water future. In just 3 weeks, the president has thrown cities and towns into chaos by shutting down funding allocated by Congress for water infrastructure projects, including the historic investments in water infrastructure provided through the bipartisan infrastructure law. This disarray has forced communities of all sizes to reevaluate how to deliver critical water infrastructure projects and will result in these projects taking longer, costing more, and ultimately delaying critical local economic development, environmental, and public health benefits. The administration's efforts will also undermine the roughly 28,000 jobs that are created for every $1 billion in water infrastructure investment, putting the jobs of laborers and manufacturers at risk, in addition to threatening our supply chains. Finally, these actions will hit the wallets of hardworking American families who will see higher water bills because of this uncertainty, at the same time that inflation is back on the rise. The silence of my colleagues across the aisle, whose states and communities are equally impacted by the president's moves to undermine water infrastructure spending, is somewhat surprising. It is my sincere hope that this silence is not a green light for further reduction in federal water infrastructure spending. We need it more now than ever. Our communities cannot withstand further setbacks to federal and state efforts to protect our water and our environment, and we cannot allow the president and his allies to burden American families with increased costs and public health risks. I welcome my colleagues to join me as I stand firmly in defense of our Great Lakes and freshwater supplies across the country to ensure a healthy environment and a strong economy for future generations. We can do both, and I look forward to working with anyone to realize this goal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back. Thank you to all of our incredible witnesses for taking your time to be here today. As I stated in my opening remarks, water issues are not and should not be a partisan issue. I hope I'm not alone in saying that I am deeply concerned with the president's efforts to freeze critical federal funds, including dollars necessary to support our federal water infrastructure. We all can agree that regulatory reform is needed, clarity is needed, but what has happened in the last 10, 20 days has been the opposite of clarity. It has increased chaos and confusion. This uncertainty could stifle all of the progress that this committee and Congress as a whole has made through historic legislation like the bipartisan infrastructure law. Stoking this kind of chaos will result in very tangible threats to every single community that is represented here at the dais. Commissioner LaTourette, can you speak a little bit to how some of the directly blocked funds, as well as the uncertainty in federal funding, is not only going to harm water infrastructure projects, but also prevent local and state governments from looking ahead to fulfill their community's water needs?
I appreciate this question. my pause is because I'm thinking hard about it. I mentioned in my testimony that we have a $1.2 trillion need nationally over the next 20 years for drinking water infrastructure. 31.6 billion of that is in New Jersey alone. And we rely, the states, which are the ones that implement the investments in our infrastructure. State governments do that, not the federal government. And what we see in New Jersey is an opportunity using those federal funds. We couple them with state funds, and then we use the governmental funds together to then leverage private market funds so that we are able to create a capital stack for investment in water infrastructure that needs to be planned out for over the course of many years. And so we have projects that are in the queue right now that are phased, meaning that one fiscal year you might do a pump station, and the next year a main, right? And so when there is a disruption in federal funding, or even just the uncertainty that is created by a suspected disruption, and even a temporary one, it reverberates throughout the system. What I mean by that is right now, our state is in the process of formulating our clean water intended use plan for the next fiscal year, which for us starts July 1. And that provides water utilities, contractors, and others with guidance about how they should be sequencing their projects, such that a disruption in the federal funding source, upon which all of that investment is built, has a cascading effect that can lead to the delay, certainly, but potentially even the abandonment of a project, right? And here we are talking about water that every business, every person needs.
It's certainly critical in Michigan's 3rd congressional district. I firmly believe that the U.S. can have both a healthy economy and a healthy environment. In fact, through the Great Lakes region, I would argue that these two outcomes are wholly interconnected, as I discussed in my opening remarks. Commissioner LaTourette, again, I know New Jersey is a little different from West Michigan's shoreline, but can you speak to how water pollution can negatively impact communities' economies with potential harm to the tourism industry, property values, and commercial operations?
Appreciate that question as well, Congresswoman. So tourism in particular is a huge driver of New Jersey's economy, right? Our pristine beaches, our quaint shore towns bring in $50 billion a year in tourism spending. And all of that spending, all of that tourism is dependent upon one thing: clean waterways. I grew up in the 1980s at a time when our parents didn't let us go to the beach in New Jersey because of high levels of pollution. And today, the Jersey Shore has the best water quality that we have ever seen. And that is a function of implementation of the Clean Water Act as a matter of permitting and enforcement, but also because of that investment paradigm, which since the beginning of our clean water investment strategy has created 170,000 one-year direct construction jobs, right? And so not only is the Clean Water Act a necessity in terms of the health of our waterways, the health of our people, but it promotes the very businesses that dot our shoreline. So imagine those businesses that dot the shoreline, that rely on the influx of tourism dollars. Imagine their struggles when they have to close a beach because of bad water quality, and nobody visits and nobody spends.
Thank you. I yield back.